5 years is a very long time to live inside a fortress built entirely of ice. When you spend half a decade believing the only woman you ever loved sold your life work to the highest bidder, your heart does not just harden, it rots. It turns into something dense and unyielding, a dead mass resting heavy inside your chest. Every morning, I put on my tailored, double-breasted charcoal suit, brushed my low fade in the mirror, and stared into dark hazel eyes that felt completely hollow. My name is Idris Bell. To the global shipping industry, I am the cold logistics tycoon who conquered the Atlantic trade routes before turning 32. To myself, I was simply a man who had been gutted, left to bleed out silently behind a mahogany desk in Mayfair. I remembered the night she left with agonizing clarity. November 3rd. The rain had beaten against the glass of my penthouse like throw knives. I had found the blueprints for our automated port system leaked on the desk of my fiercest rival, Arthur Vance. Attached to the file was an internal access code that belonged to only one person outside my executive office. My quiet, soft-spoken girlfriend, Mei-Ling Zhou. She was an archival restorer, a woman whose entire soul was built on preserving fragile things with vintage tools and endless patience. I did not ask her for an explanation. I did not give her a chance to speak. I threw her belongings into 2 black trash bags, threw them onto the wet cobblestones outside my brownstone, and told her that if I ever saw her face again, I would use every legal asset I possessed to destroy her. She had stood in the torrential downpour, her warm ivory skin pale beneath the streetlights, her obsidian hair soaked and clean to her face. She did not scream. She did not yell. She only looked at me with soft, dark brown eyes, brimming with unbearable sorrow, holding her slender arms wrapped tightly around her waist, as if she were trying to keep herself from shattering into 1,000 pieces. She walked away in silence. And for 5 years, I convinced myself that her silence was the ultimate proof of her guilt. Now, 5 years later, I stood in the private subterranean vault of St. George Private Bank in central London. The air in the vault was freezing, smelling faintly of machine oil, ozone, and old paper. I was here to finalize a high-stakes merger that would absorb my former rival's failing maritime holding company. To execute the final stock transfers, I needed my late grandfather's original founding certificates, kept locked away in safety deposit box number 412. The vault keeper turned his master key, stepped back with a muted bow, and left me alone in the sterile silence. I slid my bronze key into the second lock, turned it until the heavy mechanism clicked, and pulled the long metal drawer out onto the polished marble viewing counter. Inside lay the yellowed paper documents from 40 years ago, tied with faded navy ribbon. But lying directly on top of those certificates was an object that did not belong. It was a physical card. A thick, cream-colored cotton card pressed with tiny lavender stems along the margin. My fingers froze in midair. I recognized that handwriting instantly. It was the delicate, fluid calligraphy of Mei-Ling Zhou. My chest tightened so violently that I actually stumbled back half a step against the cold steel lockers. How had this gotten here? Then I remembered. She had kept the second emergency key to my family's private vault in her jewelry box during our 3 years together. She had come here. She had come here before she vanished off the face of the earth. My hands were shaking as I reached out and lifted the card. My breathing became ragged, echoing sharply off the tiled walls. I opened the card. Idris, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means you have finally opened grandfather's box to complete a deal that makes you untouchable. That means you are safe. It means my sacrifice worked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sacrifice? What sacrifice? I pressed my back against the cold steel wall, my dark hazel eyes darting across the ink lines, scanning the text as my soul began to unravel line by painfully spoken line. I did not sell your blueprints, Idris. I could never betray you. You were my home. But 3 days before your launch, your chief financial officer and your ex-fiancée Victoria came to my restoration studio. They did not come to negotiate. They came with signed wire receipts, forged documents, and a threat that made my blood run cold. Victoria had spent 18 months planting hidden backdoors into your network through your board members. They were planning to launch a full criminal indictment against you for insider trading and maritime fraud on the exact morning of your launch. They were going to ruin you, Idris. They were going to send you to prison for a decade and strip away every single ship, dock, and worker that carried your family name. The paper in my hand began to vibrate violently because my whole body was trembling. I could barely process the words, yet each sentence burned into my retinas like liquid fire. Victoria gave me a choice. Mei-Ling had written. I could let them release the forged evidence against you, or I could take the internal key from your study, upload the blueprints to Arthur Vance myself, and take the entire blame. They promised that if I took the fall and disappeared forever without saying a single word to you, they would destroy the forged criminal files against you and let your empire live. They gave me 12 hours to decide. I looked at you sleeping beside me that night. Idris, I saw how hard you had worked. I saw the weight of your family legacy on your shoulders. I knew you would rather go to prison than give up your integrity, but I could not let them destroy your life. So I took their sin onto my shoulders. I took the blame. I let you hate me. Because your hatred was a small price to pay for your freedom. A loud, strangled gasp escaped my throat. The vault seemed to tilt on its axis. The fluorescent light above me hummed violently. I dropped to one knee on the freezing marble floor, the tailored fabric of my trousers tearing against the sharp edge of the metal box stand, but I did not feel it. My chest was heaving. There was one more paragraph at the bottom of the card. My eyes pooled with hot tears, blurring the ink, but I wiped them away desperately with the back of my hand, forcing myself to read every single word. Please do not come looking for me. Idris. Keep building your sky. Keep winning. I am leaving London tonight. I am taking the early morning coach to the coast. I am tired, but I am taking the greatest part of you with me. I am carrying our child, Idris. A little piece of your heart is growing inside me right now. I will love her enough for both of us. Goodbye, my love. The card fell from my fingers onto the marble floor. No, no, no. A scream tore from my chest. A raw, guttural sound of pure agony that bounced off the steel walls of the vault. I fell forward onto both hands and knees, my forehead pressing directly against the ice-cold marble floor. Tears streamed down my dark brown cheeks, soaking into the pristine white collar of my shirt. 5 years. 5 years I had cursed her name. 5 years I had called her a traitor. 5 years I had drunk myself to sleep thinking she had traded my devotion for a payout from Arthur Vance. And all the while, she had stepped into the fire to save me. She had walked out into the freezing rain, broken, abandoned, and terrified, carrying my baby under her heart. My board of directors had done this. Victoria had done this. My own inner circle had orchestrated her destruction. And I, foolish, arrogant, blind fool that I was, had handed them the axe. I wept until my throat was parched and my body shook with deep, uncontrollable spasms. The pain was unbearable. It felt as though someone had reached into my chest and torn my organs out with bare hands. I had possessed millions of pounds, fleet ships, global influence, and prestige, and I was the poorest, most miserable man on the face of the earth. I lay there on the vault floor for what felt like hours, staring at the physical card she had left behind 5 years ago. It was an irreplaceable record of love, a sacred artifact of sacrifice that she had placed in my path, praying I would find it when I was strong enough to survive the truth. This story is sponsored by Straight Line Cards. In a world driven by fleeting digital noise and instant messages that are forgotten in seconds, true feelings deserve something permanent. Straight Line Cards believes that no critical word should ever be left unsaid, and no deep truth should linger in the shadows until it is too late. Whether you need to heal a long-standing rift, express a love that words alone cannot capture, or simply remind someone that they saved your life, sending a physical, handcrafted keepsake card speaks with an authority that technology can never match. Every card from Straight Line Cards is printed on museum-quality cotton paper, designed to endure for generations, and can be paired with a personalized physical gift delivered directly to the doorstep of the person who holds your heart. Do not let 5 years slip away in silence. Say what must be said today. Visit straightlinecards.com to create your personalized keepsake card now. I pulled myself up off the vault floor at 3 in the afternoon. My dark hazel eyes were bloodshot, my suit rumpled, my jaw set like forged steel. The coldness that had gripped my soul for 5 years was gone, replaced by a roaring, incandescent inferno of absolute purpose. I did not return to my corporate headquarters. I did not call my merger attorneys. I called Marcus, my head of private intelligence, a former naval operative who handled high-level corporate security. Find her, I ordered, my voice trembling with suppressed rage and desperate urgency. I do not care how many men you deploy. I do not care how much money it costs. Trace every coach line, every medical record, every coastal town registry from 5 years ago. I want Mei-Ling Zhou located before the sun rises tomorrow, or I will dismantle this entire firm and rebuild it from scratch. Marcus did not ask questions. Within 6 hours, his team had tracked a paper trail through a small charitable medical clinic in South Devon, then down to a picturesque seaside town called Dartmouth. I drove through the storm myself. I did not use a driver. I sat behind the wheel of my black SUV, driving through the blinding coastal rain, pushing the engine to its absolute limits while the image of Mei-Ling standing in the rain 5 years ago burned on the inside of my eyelids. At 6 in the morning, the rain eased into a soft, silvery mist over the harbor. The town of Dartmouth was quiet, smelling of sea salt, wood smoke, and damp earth. I parked 2 blocks away from a small storefront nestled between 2 timber-framed cottages. The sign above the door read, Rosewood Artisan Bakery and Archival Bookshop. My heart pounded so hard against my ribs that I could feel the pulse throbbing in my temples. I stepped out into the damp air, my double-breasted suit dark with ocean mist, and walked slowly down the narrow cobblestone alley. I stood across the street, hiding in the shadow of an ancient stone archway, and looked through the clear glass window of the shop. Inside, bathed in the soft golden glow of hanging filament bulbs, was Mei-Ling. She looked older, thinner, but so breathtakingly beautiful that my knees nearly gave out a second time. Her warm ivory skin was radiant in the dawnlight. Her obsidian hair was pulled back into her signature low chignon, though a few soft strands escaped around her frame. She wore a simple vintage silk cream blouse, rolled up at the sleeves, and dark wool trousers covered by a flour-dusted canvas apron. She was kneaded sourdough bread on a heavy oak table, her movement calm, steady, and patient. Then, a movement near the back counter caught my eye. A little girl stepped out from the kitchen doorway. She was roughly 4 years old. She wore a tiny yellow knitted sweater over navy overalls. She had Mei-Ling's delicate, soft features and warm ivory skin, but her eyes were my eyes. Dark hazel, wide, brilliant, and full of fierce intelligence. My breath hitched in my throat. Tears welled up in my eyes once more, hot and fast. My daughter, my blood, my little girl. She walked over to Mei-Ling, reaching up with tiny hands to grab the edge of the apron. Mei-Ling immediately stopped kneading, wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, knelt down to the child's level, and wrapped her arms around her. She kissed the top of the girl's head with a tenderness so deep, so pure, that it shattered whatever was left of my hardened ego. I had spent 5 years living in luxury, while the woman who saved my life worked 16-hour days in a small coastal kitchen to raise my child alone. I did not wait any longer. I pushed open the heavy oak door of the bakery. A small brass bell chimed softly above my head. The sound echoed through the warm, sweet-scented room, filled with the aroma of roasted coffee beans, fresh cinnamon, and warm yeast. Mei-Ling did not look up immediately. "Welcome to Rosewood," she said softly, her voice melodic and smooth, just as I remembered it in my dreams. "We open in 15 minutes, but if you need a hot beverage..." She turned around, holding a tray of wooden pastry boards. Her sentence died in her throat. The wooden tray slipped from her slender fingers, clattering onto the counter with a dull thud. Her warm ivory skin drained of color. Her soft dark brown eyes widened in absolute shock, reflecting my silhouette standing in the doorway. "Idris," she whispered. The word was hardly more than a breath, carrying 5 years of unspoken grief, terror, and ghost-written memories. "Mei-Ling," I said. My voice was broken, gravelly, stripped of all corporate composure. She took an instinctual step back, placing her hand gently over her daughter's shoulder, pulling the little girl behind her canvas apron. "Who found you? How did you? Why are you here?" She was terrified. She thought I had come to finish the exile. She thought I had come to destroy her, just as I had threatened 5 years ago on that wet street in London. I did not answer her with words. I stepped across the wooden floorboards, unbuttoned my double-breasted charcoal suit jacket, and dropped heavily onto both knees right there in front of her counter. "Idris!" she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "What are you doing? Get up." I stayed on my knees. I pressed my palms flat against the rustic floorboards. I bowed my head until my forehead nearly touched her leather shoes. "I went to St. George Bank yesterday." I wept, my chest heaving with silent, racking sobs. I opened safety deposit box 412. I found the card. Mei-Ling. I read every single word. The entire bakery fell dead silent. The sound of the ocean waves outside seemed to fade into nothingness. Mei-Ling froze. Her shoulders began to tremble. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "You were never supposed to read that until the merger was complete." I read it. I sobbed, lifting my head to look up at her. My dark hazel eyes were dripping with tears, pleading for a grace I knew I did not deserve. I read what Victoria did. I read what Arthur Vance did. I read how you gave up your name, your passion, your safety, to keep me from going to prison. I know everything, Mei-Ling. I know you took my sin. I know you took their poison so I could keep my air. Tears spilled over her lower lashes, tracing slow, shining paths down her warm ivory cheeks. She lowered her head, covering her face with her hands as 5 years of suppressed sorrow finally broke through her composed exterior. "I am so sorry," I begged, my voice cracking on every syllable. I am so sorry I did not listen to you. I am so sorry I threw your life into the rain. I was a fool. I was a blind, arrogant monster who let the snake in my house dictate who was good. I have lived 5 years in hell, but my hell was nothing compared to what I forced you to suffer. Mei-Ling slowly sank to her knees, right in front of me. The cold distance between us vanished. Her slender hands, warm and soft, reached out timidly and touched the sides of my wet face. Her thumbs brushed away the tears falling from my dark hazel eyes. I never hated you, Idris, she whispered softly, her forehead leaning forward until it touched mine. I loved you too much to let them tear you down. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over, I gasped, pulling her slender frame into my arms with a desperate ferocity. I wrapped my arms around her waist, burying my face in the crook of her neck, smelling the familiar scent of lavender, paper, and cinnamon. She held me back, her arms locking tight around my neck, weeping quietly into my double-breasted jacket. We stayed like that on the floor of the bakery for a long time, holding each other as the morning sun finally broke through the coastal mist, casting warm golden rays across the room. A soft, hesitant voice broke through our embrace. Mama? Why is the big man crying? My breath caught. I slowly released Mei-Ling and turned my head while still kneeling on the floor. The little girl stood 2 feet away, her dark hazel eyes wide with curiosity, tilting her head as she looked at me. She had my low brow, my jawline, but her mother's gentle grace. Mei-Ling wiped her face, offering our daughter a wet, beautiful smile. Sweetheart, this is Idris. This is your father. The word hung in the quiet bakery like a holy sanctum. Father. My hand shook as I extended it toward her, palm open, offering her complete safety. Hello, my sweet angel, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. The little girl looked at my hand, then at my face, recognizing the dark hazel eyes that mirrored her own. She did not run away. She did not hide. She walked forward with small, deliberate steps, placed her tiny hand into my large palm, and smiled. My heart, which had been frozen solid in a dark vault for 5 long years, finally burst open. I pulled my daughter gently into my chest, wrapping one arm around her and the other around Mei-Ling, holding my entire universe in a single embrace. I stayed in Dartmouth for 3 days. I did not return to London until I had bought every property on that street to ensure no one could ever harass them again. Then, I unleashed the full weight of my empire. I did not execute the merger with Arthur Vance's firm. Instead, I turned the physical card over to a specialized team of forensic investigators and federal prosecutors. Within 48 hours, we unearthed the hidden wire transfers, the forged affidavits, and the blackmail communications sent by Victoria and my former chief financial officer. I dismantled them systematically. Victoria was stripped of her board positions, charged with corporate conspiracy and extortion, and sentenced to federal detention. My former chief financial officer surrendered his assets to avoid a life sentence. Arthur Vance's firm declared bankruptcy within a week as my fleet swept up every single contract he possessed. I removed every snake from my garden. I burned the corrupt foundation to the ground and rebuilt my logistics firm into a fortress of absolute transparency. 6 months later, we left London behind for good. I moved my global headquarters to a sweeping coastal estate overlooking the white cliffs of Devon, only 10 minutes from the bakery where Mei-Ling had built her sanctuary. I constructed a state-of-the-art archival restoration studio on the grounds of our home, filling it with vintage binding equipment, imported paper stocks, and climate-controlled vaults for her work. Every morning now, I do not wake up inside a cold, silent fortress of ice. I wake up to the sound of ocean waves, the smell of fresh coffee, and the sight of Mei-Ling resting beside me, her obsidian hair spread across silk pillows, her warm ivory skin soft in the morning light. I watch our daughter run through the sunlit gardens, her dark hazel eyes shining with absolute joy and security. I learned the hardest lesson a man can learn in this life. Fortune, influence, and corporate power are meaningless if you lose the soul of the person who believed in you when you had nothing. I spent 5 years believing I was betrayed by the woman I loved. The truth was that I had been saved by an angel whose love was far greater than my pride. I will spend the rest of my life on my knees if necessary, honoring her sacrifice, protecting our daughter, and proving that every breath I take belongs entirely to her. If you want more stories like this, like and subscribe.